All right, let's convene our work session, budget work session to order this morning. Today we have two items that are going to be on our agenda. We're going to have the Department of Public Safety, Communications, and Emergency Management, and then we'll have a review of the manager's compensation proposals for general employees as well as public safety employees. But we are going to begin with Mr. Schwartz introducing our session today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With me this morning is the Vicar of Vicissitude, Mr. Aaron Miller.
Good morning. As the County Manager mentioned, I'm Aaron Miller, the Director of Public Safety, Communications, and Emergency Management. With me this morning, I've got a few members of the team. We've got Jeff Bergen, who's our finance lead. We've got Dave Mulholland, who is the administrator of the Emergency Communication Center. I've got Will Flagler, who many of you know, who's the Deputy Director for Emergency Management. We've also got a few members of our staff who are going to make their way over to participate in the process. We got David Morrison and also Hannah Winnett, who is actually new to our team, has done a wonderful job, came over on an opportunity from DHS and is staying with us permanent. So we're very excited to have them, and thank you for having us this morning. So I just wanted to start briefly with a review of the mission and sort of provide the context for the department, because I know over the past year or two there were some name changes as well as a few other things. But our mission is to coordinate emergency preparedness and response capabilities, resources, and outreach for the Arlington community. And one of the things that the county manager asked me, I'm approaching my 1-year tenure with the county, and he asked me the other day, he said, what's different about where you came from and where you are? And I told him, I said, it seems that everyone I run into here asks me who you work for or where you work or what you do. And so when I tell them, you know, I'm the Director of Public Safety, Communications, and Emergency Management, they really kind of look at me and go, what does that mean, right? So making it easy for folks, we coordinate, we help with communication, and we make sure that command and control is where it needs to be in a crisis. So it's the easiest way I can boil it down for folks and for our residents within the county. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit about our department overview. And the information on the left-hand side really talks about what emergency management does, and on the right, emergency communication. So I wanted to walk through a few highlights from this past fiscal year. On the left, as I mentioned, you've got Will Flagler, who's our Deputy Director of Emergency Management. And the core responsibilities of that division really have to do with making sure that not only the county is prepared, but also that our community is prepared for a wide variety of emergencies and incidents. And so things like exercises, right? A few weeks ago, our team assisted with the high threat unit active violent exercise, which really is an end-to-end exercise. It involved participation from Arlington Public Schools, from a variety of departments within the county, as well as some of our regional partners, to really take a look at what our plans are for active violence events and how we can better prepare and better respond. We've also got responsibility for the county's emergency operations plan. So we have staff dedicated to planning and to working with our 18 emergency support functions. And so those span a variety of critical functions that are necessary to keep the county operating. Everything from transportation, energy infrastructure, obviously public health and medical, law enforcement, and the like. We also manage the watch desk, which is the 24-hour a day watch and warning and notification spot for the county. So that's a group of folks who are sending out alerts to our residents, that are notifying leadership as well as our public safety teams of events and incidents as they happen. They're co-located in the Emergency Communication Center, and they keep in touch with a variety of our partners, monitoring dashboards, for instance, from the Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, from the Airports Authority, and things like that. They're sort of the link and the nexus of our process of preparing for, responding to, and making sure that we send the right assets at the right time to the right places. On building, sustaining, and strengthening community resilience, this is one of the important things. As I mentioned, community engagement and education is becoming ever more important. The board members, as you know, you participated in programs such as Until Help Arrives. Those are the valuable programs that work across disciplines and across departments to make sure that our residents in particular have the information, the skills that they need in order to be successful. So, you know, together with Dr. Reed Smith from the fire department, Samantha Brand in our office helps with that program, and actually had one in this room yesterday, as a matter of fact, for county staff. And there's a train the trainer coming up so that we can increase the number of folks able to provide that program. You heard me briefly mention emergency notification, and that's one of the important things that our office sort of coordinates. There is a regional effort called Capital Alert to make sure that we have as many folks as we can signed up to receive emergency messages. I want to let the public know that they can visit readyarlington.com. That's readyarlington.com to sign up and opt in to receive alerts. On that page, they can choose weather alerts. They can choose to get alerts passed through directly from the Weather Service, as well as sign up alerts directly from the watch desk. That's traffic notification and incidents, that's special event notification and incidents, and things like that. Arlington County has about an 11 or 12% opt-in rate. So we've got about 27,000 folks in the county who have opted into that message. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, and we continually work to push that. However, it is the highest in the National Capital Region, and it is also several percentage points over what we see nationally. However, we know that that's never enough, right? So we're looking and using other mediums to be able to connect with our residents and with our businesses and our constituents. For example, Twitter, Facebook. We've got several thousand followers on those social media platforms as well. And so we're consistently looking at ways to reach folks, to get them these messages through their chosen mediums and through things as they change. We know communications change constantly. I do want to give a big thank you and a big plug as part of that building, strengthening, and sustaining community to our volunteer organizations. It's a very large and active volunteer community within Arlington. I had the privilege of visiting with our community emergency response team about 2 weeks ago. They're on class 60. That's over 600 Arlingtonians that have been trained to provide a very high level of assistance to our first responders in the event of catastrophic emergency. And they train on everything from light search and rescue to medical care and the ability to assist on scenes with our fire department, EMS, as well as with our police department. That program is completely volunteer-led. We obviously provide structure, we provide resources, but it is volunteer-led and volunteer-managed, and it's a wonderful asset that we have within Arlington. Moving on to the right-hand side, as I mentioned, Public Safety Communications. It's Dave Mulholland who leads the team over there. Our public safety telecommunicators may be what you think of when you think of 911, right? Our dispatchers and our call takers. I want to say that they do a phenomenal job, first and foremost. They handle about 300,000 incoming calls a year into the 911 center. About 92,000 of those are 911 calls, and about 228,000 or so, the remainder are essentially what we classify as non-emergency calls. But they run the gamut of things that our residents need assistance with. Some of them to connect to the police department for a theft report, a follow-up from an incident. Some of them are to connect with the fire department about alarm status in a building, right? And then we also take calls for a number of other departments when our residents have issues through that non-emergency line, and we attempt to connect them to the right resource. I want to point out that National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week is coming up. April 14th is the week where we're going to recognize and highlight together with some of our other county partners the work that our telecommunicators do, as well as highlight the career opportunity that exists for folks. It's a great way to be involved in public safety, and it is a great career path that is available with the county. I want to point to that system, as I mentioned, and one of the bullets on there is about interagency coordination. You know, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without the support and teamwork from the Arlington County Fire Department and the Police Department. There are firefighters as well as police officers trained as dispatchers who supplement our staff, and they also help us to provide them the best service, right? They're a primary customer for us as well as the residents within Arlington County. And what I mean by that is we are really their connection to folks within the community who are having an emergency. We are providing those firefighters and those dispatchers, those firefighters, those paramedics, and those police officers with pre-arrival information. We're providing them with connection to regional resources. We are working with our partners to get the right assets to the right place at the right time. And we really wouldn't be able to do it without their cooperation. So it's a great bit of teamwork. The next box you'll see is about public safety systems. And this, I think, as well begins to tell the complete story aside from just dispatching and call taking. We also manage the public safety radio system, which not only supports police and fire, but also provides a critical backbone of communications for Arlington Public Schools, for the Department of Environmental Services, the Water Sewer Streets, as well as some transportation folks, the animal welfare folks, as well as several other smaller organizations and some of our regional partners. So that's a very critical piece. Over 2.1 million radio transmissions every year go across that system. So we're managing that as a component of what we do. As mentioned, you know, these systems, as you can imagine, are fairly complex. And I really want to point out, Jeff Horowitz works in the Emergency Communications Center and runs the public safety systems. And this is, I think, an area to highlight, and I wanted to provide a little bit more context for you. We've got two very ambitious projects going on right now. One that I think really highlights the county's efforts in regional coordination. The board members may remember a joint board meeting with Alexandria regarding a 911 call system. And this has been a project of critical importance for us in public safety. That project is proceeding and is on pace, and we will have an implementation of a new 911 call processing system that is going to prepare us for the next generation, so to speak. That's the term that's used, the next gen 911. You know, highlighting that as a regional program, I think, is an important thing. It really provides the kind of redundancy, the kind of efficiency, and the kind of partnership that we see with public safety. It's going to be much more cost-effective for us and much more resilient in the long term. And we're also undergoing the CAD, the computer-aided dispatch replacement. So on the next slide, I wanted to sort of highlight for you what these projects provide us, right? So you've got a mock-up of a screen. So our dispatchers and call takers right now, those telecommunicators have about 4 or 5 screens in front of them. And so when folks sort of can't understand the enormity of the data that we're sort of seeing now, I wanted to provide this as a graphic to give you some context. On this one screen, so that, once again, this is one of 4 or 5 screens, this is what the new call processing system will enable us to do and the data ingest and what our telecommunicators are faced with. On the left, in that where you see a number 1, you see that's the incoming call data. So we're getting not only the phone number, but on a wire line, you know, plain old telephone, an address that's attached to that account. And with a wireless call, we're getting a name of the account holder, we're getting the wireless company, as well as some information about cell tower and sector for basic location. Below that, you'll see the call control. So this is where we can pick up, hang up, as well as the status of other things that are happening on the system. So other folks that are receiving calls, so that we can determine if there are linked incidents. In the middle, On 2, what you'll see is a text system. Arlington does have the capability to receive text to 911. And a big part of that is obviously, valuable in today's world where folks are more apt sometimes to text rather than call. And there may be situations where some folks are unable to call, right? So we have that option, and this is going to be an integrated option. Right now, it's a separate screen. This call processor allows us to integrate these things together. Then you'll see call queue, and then you'll see something on number 4 that's particularly important, something called enhanced data. What we're seeing now with the rise of smart devices, with things like OnStar, with smart apps, with alarm systems, they have the ability to send us enhanced data. So say someone has a medical assist device, and they press a button and ask for help, or there's an OnStar, we'll be able to get additional information, medical history when they opt into it, those sorts of things. And there are a number of benefits to being able to get those that pre-arrival information and pass it on. On the right-hand side, you'll see number 5 and number 6. The number 5 is the dial directory. So we have, obviously, we receive a number of calls, and in this region, sometimes folks just don't know where they're at. This is the best way I can explain. These are one-touch buttons that allow us to connect folks to the complex web of public safety partners. You've got the Park Police, you've got the Airports Authority, you've got a number of other organizations, Metro. If someone calls within Arlington County and hits a cell phone tower that is in Arlington County, they could also be maybe in Loudoun, they could be in some places across the river. We need to get them to the right place very quickly. These one-touch direct dials allow us to do those things, right? But it also includes ring-downs to fire stations, includes ring-downs to the Pentagon, includes ring-downs to a number of other critical partners so that we have direct connections with them. And then in number 6, I think one of the most important things that we're seeing is more location-based data, right? A number of times we hear, and I see this often, we hear from folks maybe that aren't familiar with the area, a number of visitors that come in. I don't know where I am. It happens. These sorts of maps allow us to have a better idea. Now, it depends on what the system is, but we can put that information with location in context with some of the other things like vehicle locators on our police cars, our fire trucks, and ambulances, right? So we can really hone in on where folks are and be able to provide better information to police officers, firefighters, and paramedics as they respond. Next slide. So just a brief note about the summary of our budget changes. There are really minimal changes, and those mostly account for contractual and staff costs. One of the things that I want to highlight is the one-time fundings that's mentioned there. I think this one-time funding represents really, I think, exciting opportunities to push forward in a few areas of interdepartmental cooperation. The first of which is one-time funding to provide support for a text-based system which allows us to initiate a text. So right now, we can receive a text, but we are unable to initiate a text out. There's an additional module that needs to be put on. Essentially, because of certain privacy regulations and because of other things in place, we can't just go around texting someone's phone number, right? So in order to add the appropriate systems, we've got to have a little bit of software support and a little bit of an additional module bolted onto to what we have now. That's going to allow us to address the growing number of, quote, abandoned 911 calls, misdials, hang-ups. Your smartwatch calls 911 now. Your Alexa can call 911 now. Your car, your refrigerator, just about anything you can imagine can almost call 911 now. And we get a lot of those calls. We get between 17 and 18,000 calls a year of folks who may have an emergency but have hung up before they get to us. We call them back right now. We have a process to call them back. But how many people answer their cell phone when there's an unknown number? How many people know that the number, we can't call you back from 911. We're calling you back from the non-emergency number, 70355, right? How many, you're not gonna answer that number. We find in other communities that folks who receive a text message are able to mitigate that incident about 80% of the time. We're all more apt to respond to a text message. I don't want to talk on the phone. This is going to allow us really to look at meeting residents where they are, making sure our resources are better utilized from a police standpoint, from a fire standpoint. Because if we get one of those calls, in some cases, protocol is to send an officer for a landline, right? And in some communities, they're sending even for wireless to the best guess. So we want to be able to stay ahead of these things. We want to be able to make sure that we're staying up with changing technology. Yes, we're calling them back 3 times right now. So that's an important thing to note, right? This is going to help us change that practice. Thank you. Help me remember the things. Right, he does. The second part of that is you heard in the DTS presentation, and this is the manager sort of pokes me a little bit about this, but you heard a little bit about this idea of working in the third space, right? The idea that there is the ability to be connected to county resources in such a way that you are able to be flexible, adaptable, and agile with where you work. That's one of the core components of public safety, right? And that's one of the core components of emergency management. We don't know where we're going to be, we don't know what we're going to need, but we know we're going to need it sometime, and we know we need to have flexibility. What this one-time funding is going to allow us to do is partner with the Department of Technology Services to look at cloud computing as well as something called virtual desktop. And so essentially, instead of logging into a device and having your profile live on that computer, the profile, my documents and everything else live in the cloud. And so I theoretically could be able to log in at any location and have access to the systems, to the resources, to the material in order to better serve the community during an emergency. So that's pretty exciting for us, and I think it's going to really change how we think about redundancy and resiliency within our work. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit of department overview about recruitment and retention. I wanted to put this in because one of the first things that I had when I came on board was the audit report that was published by Dr. Horton. It was actually about a year ago this month. You know, one of the things is that people, they're our most important resource. I'm just making sure. Yeah, it wasn't her. So the people are our most important resource, and you know the audit report really highlighted that in 3 key areas, right? Training, and in how we allocate our resources for non-emergency calls, and really how we have data to make decisions. And you know, when we started to dig into getting better data in order to make our decisions better, we noticed that over the past few years in particular, on top of a high vacancy rate, right? These are tough jobs to hire for across public safety. You've heard that from our police and fire counterparts as well. We had some net losses. And so we really had to take a look at end-to-end what we were doing in recruiting, in training, and in hiring. And so we're continuing on that, but I wanted to provide you with a few of the things that we're doing in order to reverse some of these trends and also try and see if we can be better at what we're doing. The first is in hiring and training. We identified the need to create a separate dedicated person for training. In fiscal year 2014, that position had been eliminated as part of reductions, and we really made a commitment and said, we're going to have to bring this dedicated position back. And so, you know, we were able to, with the support of manager, figure out how we could use existing resources more efficiently, how we could work within what we had, and make sure that we separated out that position. I think it's shown some fairly great success because now, with hiring and training being different, we were able to do the second thing, focus on having 3 or more hiring and recruiting sessions per year. If you look at this, in some of these years, in particular 2016, we only had 1 hiring session simply because there weren't resources to put behind recruitment. It's an extensive testing process and things like that. Now, by splitting these resources, we've been able to have 3 this past calendar year, and it's our goal to have 3 every year, and even look at some of the models where they have continuous openings. All those things take resources for us to figure out, but we're working on it. Our recruitment has also been refined. We're using more targeted social media, right? Because we know that folks who are newer into the workforce respond differently. We partnered with the fire department. I love firefighters. Everybody wants to be a firefighter, right? But there are limited spots that are available. And so we're offering folks another opportunity within public safety, right? If they would like to, what we've done is been able to say, look, you were in the fire recruit process, you might not make the cut, but we've got these other job opportunities in public safety, one of which is a dispatcher. Would you like to come learn more about it? We actually did end up with one from that process, which is great. We are offering referral bonuses, right? We've got the ability to provide incentives for folks to recruit, and we've had success with that. Within the testing process was historically offered Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Well, we know that's a barrier. We know that's a barrier for some folks who may have a job. So we've been able to offer it on nights and on weekends and in different facilities to be more accessible. And then, what you'll hear later today, compensation, always an arms race. But through the recent class and compensation study, I'm proud to say that we were able to get a 5% increase for all of our frontline staff, in addition to the annual 3.25 that they see. So that 5% increase, as well as a market adjustment in their rate, makes them much more competitive and sort of aligns them better with what we as a county think is an appropriate compensation philosophy. We'll go to the next slide, and I'll begin to wrap up. I think that, one of the things that I wanted to highlight really is, as we move into fiscal year 2020 with this budget and beyond, our goal within our department is really concentrating on being future-proof. We are a forward-leaning and prepared department, and we want to stay that way to make sure that we have the right resources at the right time, as I mentioned. I want to highlight a few things, one of which is in the manager's budget submission, he mentions that key regional grant programs are seeing changes. It's no secret to all of you that the Department of Homeland Security as a whole is undergoing priority shifts. And as a result of those priority shifts, you see changes in the priorities of grant programs. The particular one is the Urban Area Security Initiative, which funds approximately $52 million across the region for all of the for a wide variety of public safety things, systems, tools, as well as personnel. So the manager, as we see those funds shift, the manager this year made a commitment, and I believe there's an investment of about $149,000 to sustain some programs that were previously on the grant program. Now, there are other things that are sustained by the grant program where we're continuing to figure out how changes are going to impact that. And one of them is emergency management staff and systems. 4 of our 8 folks who work in emergency management are funded through these regional grant programs. So I wanted to highlight that as something, because I know that as members of the Policy Council, for example, and things like that, that these are discussions that continue to happen and do have impacts within us locally as well as across the region. I think that on the second bullet point regarding growing demands in the community, it's unfortunate that recent events such as those in New Zealand and that we continue to see highlight the need for additional community involvement and additional community engagement and training. In some places we're seeing that the request and the need are outpacing resources, right? And so we are finding ways to be more efficient, ways to be more effective by partnering with various organizations, by having, for example, the train the trainer that's going to happen, that the high threat unit is sponsoring for until help arrives. Those things are going to be very important to figure out how we can continue to deliver the services that the community needs and requests in such a way that essentially doesn't break the system, right? And I think that's important for us to consider and think about. Not only in those things, but the demands for information. Easy access to social media, easy access to things like streaming services mean that our residents are more connected and more informed. And so it is incumbent upon us to make sure that they are receiving timely information when it comes to emergencies, timely information when it comes to special events and incidents. And it's incumbent upon us to make sure we're meeting them through the pathways that they need. And then the final thing is really, in general, leaning into change. And there's a lot that wraps into this. But it's, once again, no surprise that as things like technology change, as things within our environment change, disasters are becoming more costly. Things like climate change are having an impact in what we see in weather. And as threats continue to evolve and grow through whether it be domestic extremism or other acts of violence, our systems and our infrastructure and our processes need to be agile and flexible enough to adapt. And so I've met with all of you regarding components of that, right? Like the board annexed to the emergency operations plan. That's a component of what I'm talking about. So looking at the emergency operations plan, looking at the systems and technology, looking at the facilities, looking at all of those things to make sure that we are agile and able to respond. One of the last things that I want to mention is, you know, for example, when we think about the life cycle of technology now, it used to be that we thought about a technology or an appliance as a life cycle until it ended, right? So we could put this piece of equipment in, we could do it, and it could work, and when it didn't work, then we would replace it. That isn't working anymore. Technology is changing and evolving such that the life cycle replacement, the piece may work, but it may not meet the needs. A Pentium 86, you can still plug it in and it'll work, but it's not going to produce the type of data or the type of information that people require. So this is an important component that I just think is, as we continue to look forward, is a challenge for us.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I didn't realize you were around for the P-86s. That's a little bit before your time. All right, so from my notes, I see that that our EPAC commission, Emergency Preparedness Advisory Commission, is going to be doing a comprehensive presentation on April 2nd when we have police, fire, and sheriff. But I do see Jackie Snelling from EPAC who's here, so I just want to make sure that's correct. You're just here to observe, Jackie, or? Yes. Okay, terrific. All right, wonderful. So questions, comments, discussions from the board, and I'd like to give the honors of starting us off to the board member who I think has been most involved with this over the years, Vice Chair Garvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, I've broken down some questions into two segments. The one I get most interested in is the public engagement, because that's really my wheelhouse. But I thought I would just start on a few technical things just because I'm kind of curious about. I noticed on the fancy screen with all of the things up there, there was a language button. So that must be a big deal. Could you talk a little bit about how we handle languages and how often somebody calls, maybe with a 911 call, and they actually can't speak English, and what we do?
So great question and excellent point to the fact that, you know, we have to make sure we have the resources to meet the community needs, right? So there's two things that we do. The first of which is we offer through HR, similar to the police department, additional compensation for folks who speak languages that are required. So we do try to make sure that on every shift we have a mix of folks who speak, for instance, Spanish, Farsi, and the like. We do see an increasing number of folks who either English as a second language or require additional services. Because of the wide variety of dialects that we see in the region, the wide variety of languages, we also use a language line. So we have a service as part of that direct dial that we can connect to directly and then use interpretation services of that language line to help us out. Similar to what Anita's group uses in DHS, right, in some of the other county resources.
And just to push a little, because I'm curious, I mean, I assume someone calls, they're upset, they're speaking a language that maybe you don't recognize, and you have to work fast. I get how DHS would do it. How does the language line have something set up that they can just talk to them and somebody figures out what the language is?
Yes, yeah, they do. They have that, which is remarkable, and it does help, particularly when there's a wide variety. But one of the things that I think is that many don't understand is when we receive that call, the call taker is already entering in what information we do have. So if we do have an address, we do have a location, they're already passing what little bits we see on that screen over so that it can be initiated and dispatch can begin. So as soon as we have everything we need, they're going to start rolling resources that way. So even if they get a little bit that there's an accident, or even if they get they're going to start rolling resources while they continue to gather information to not delay.
Arrive, they've got the language help when they get
Absolutely.
there. I got it. Cool. I got more questions, but I don't want to.
Yeah, if I could just follow up with one just on this. Generally with alerts and figuring out how to get people connected to being aware of what's going on, how do we deal comprehensively with those hard to reach populations, which could include limited English proficiency, seniors, and then we've got a whole lot of people who are transient around here.
Yeah. So there's two, I'm going to answer that in two parts. The first part on folks who are more permanent in the community and maybe difficult to reach. It's about connecting with our partners and connecting with our key informants in the community, whether it's their faith leader, whether it's their school, whether it's, Arlington Public Schools partners with us to be able to push information to parents. If they sign up through Arlington Public Schools to receive information, we want to make sure that we send our information to Arlington Public Schools so they can use their networks as well. On the second part, folks who are transient, the system actually offers us the ability to use keywords to opt in or to text to opt in. So you don't have to sign up. You can actually text in, for instance, if we had an emergency, we would create a keyword around that emergency. You could text to receive updates. And so through partnering with the Chamber of Commerce, with hotel associations, we're able to say, for instance, there's in my previous life, I used one called Mardi Gras. And so when you showed up at a hotel, you were able to text Mardi Gras to a number and be signed up. And we could then purge the list after a number of weeks to make sure when you go back home, you weren't receiving updates. We do the same thing here. So around 4th of July, around Army 10 Mile, Marine Corps Marathon, around those types of special events, we offer the same services.
Have we ever considered or tried partnering with the restaurants and other social establishments in our areas to try and capture their patrons who sometimes require emergency assistance for their own poor life choices?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that's one of the things that we want to push on, right? Where for instance, the police department's great restaurant liaison program can get us to those restaurant owners. We're going to be able to do those things.
All right, Mr. Gutschall.
Thank you. Sort of a follow-up on this. I'm mindful of the key budget considerations that you've outlined for us, the growing demands of the community and the leaning into change. And so my question, actually I'm going to start with a simple question, then I'll do a follow-up that's a little bit more in deep. Why, when we get an alert, why does it say, please reply to confirm?
So, right. So in many cases, at the bottom, we want to make sure that you're getting the alert, but also the system is intelligent enough to continue alerting you on what we call alert pathways. So, for instance, you may register with your home phone number, your cell phone, as well as your email address. And you can, within the system, set your priorities. And so if you don't confirm that you got it, the system will continue down the notification pathway and maybe call you at your house if you've put in your home phone number, maybe send you an email in addition. So that's one reason. The second reason is we want to make sure, and we do this seasonally, right? We do this around certain markers, that it's still valid information. It happens all the time. People change cell phones, people change email addresses, and may not update their information. So if we see consistently that we're not reaching somebody who's signed up to receive an alert, we can work to figure out what that reason is. Many times folks will catch it before because they will say, why do I keep getting these? I got it 3 times over 3 systems. And we can explain to them this is why, because it is set to roll down to make sure that you get that information.
I appreciate the answer. However, I am curious in terms of the leaning into change and also then the impact on the budget that as this channel, if you will, and the multiple channels proliferate. And as you've already talked about, we've got the Internet of Things and all kinds of devices that can contact us, and then our desire to make sure that we're reaching people where we need to reach them and when we need to reach them. But this, it's information overload at a certain point, right? And people, and I suspect that the reason why there's a cap of generally, as I read in the notes across the nation, of 10% participation, and we're sort of at that cap, that sounds like that's pretty standard, is because people get frustrated by, I don't want to sign up for something else. It's not spam, but it can be annoying at times to get multiple notifications of, it's not always a major life-threatening event, right? And so I'm curious about your staff, and as we move into the future, lean into the change, where is this going? Because I'm personally worried, one, that we only have a 10% participation rate, and I think we ought to talk about what do we do to exceed that national average, but also how do we do it in a way that is not so burdensome on us of trying to call back every time a refrigerator calls us, but how do we not overwhelm people? Like, how do you strike that right balance, and where is it moving? And I'm particularly concerned because home phone landlines are
Going away.
are quickly becoming obsolete.
For many of us.
For many of us, and I think for those that aren't, there's always the bell curve, but that tail will catch up. My personal belief, and then cell phones. Now it's becoming more common, as you referenced, that people don't bother to answer their cell phones if they don't recognize the number anymore. So what happens if we sort of burn the text channel, and the email is already problemsome in terms of just overloaded with spam? So where is it headed in that direction? And
yeah, I think because of the wide variability, right? What we're talking about is individual preference. What we're talking about is individual risk threshold and individual attention to incidents. Some of us may not think that a flash flood is something you need to be warned about, but others do. So one of the aspects of the system when you opt in to receive alerts is you choose what you would like to see as far as weather, as far as traffic, as far as other incident notifications. You choose your method, as well as you can set quiet time, and you can choose a few other options. So I think a piece of of combating what you are talking about is in providing the individual with the authority to choose some things. Now, I think it is also important for us to have access to tools that in a dire emergency still allow us to notify those folks. And we do have that. There is the opt-in system, and then there is, as many may remember, earlier this year, the federal government tested a system called the Wireless Emergency Alert System that goes to your phone and sets it off no matter what. Right? You don't have to opt into that. That is a required feature set. We have access to that system, and in many communities it is rarely used because, as you've said, we want to make sure it is for critically important things that sort of spark that reaction and get folks to pay attention. I think it is, and this is, I think, part of the being agile enough, right? We need organizations like EPAC, right? Those are the types of folks who can help us look at these problems, talk to the community, and really get down at a granular level and figure out what works for you, what makes it better for you. I agree with you completely. This is a big thing.
Well, I think you're thinking in the right direction. And before I turn it over, just real quick, I want to suggest that if there is interest in bumping up the participation level, this might be one of those things that would be great to reach out to our partners with Arlington Public Schools. There's a lot of part of the curriculum, in particular high school level, that's project-based learning. I think this would be a great little project to have some students brainstorm on and come up with some ideas about how you might increase participation rates.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, if I just follow up a little bit. And it seems to me part of the answer is wrapped up, it's all the same answer was, so you say, you get a number that you recognize, and I know it's my mother, my sister, my daughter, and I'm going to answer that phone because I recognize them, they're family. And hopefully we'll get, so if it's something from Arlington County, a lot of people sort of feel it's almost, maybe not quite family, but that it's a group that they want to be a part of, they feel a part of, and they want to be connected to. And I think the more we create that, the more people will sign up because it'll feel like the thing that you do to be part of this community. It's building community is what it's about, I think. Thanks.
All right. Mr. DeFerranti.
So first, was glad to see the slide on recruitment and retention. That's very helpful. I have a couple of questions a little bit related to sort of staffing and the volume of the two types of calls that you're seeing. They're related to web page 385. First, you mentioned that there's, and I don't know if you covered this in your presentation, I don't believe so, the steps to reduce the number of non-emergency calls. And I have not used the non-emergency number. And just if you could talk about what those steps are and what your sort of ways, because I do see a tick up in the number of non-emergencies.
So this is a great question and a good point, and I'm glad you brought it up because I did forget to talk about it. The use of the non-emergency number, and as you noted rightly, sort of a tick up in that, really is about making sure that the community in general has the information it needs. What we see is that, yes, while a good number of our calls are for public safety related things on non-emergency, getting a police report, figuring out where to go for those things, it's also folks who just don't know why trash didn't get picked up, why, right? So there is a comprehensive effort looking at customer service, customer intake, and the process by which we do that. A few of the things that I'll highlight, first of all, is websites. So you may have noticed a little bit of redesign on the website. It's about making it easier for residents to find that information, or that we can quickly point them to without having to go through much of a process on the phone. If we can even reduce the time, we spend, a minute or so on these calls when we look at it, sort of mitigating them. I think the other parts are things like helping to get folks to where they need to be in the first call. So some communities use a phone tree actually on their non-emergency line. We're talking about that and sort of seeking information from other communities about the best practice, but the fact remains that a large number of those folks may have a public safety need, and we don't want to delay getting them to where they need to be. So there's a balance there that we haven't quite figured out what the best practice is. And then there's other alternative technologies, right, that are really being discussed. Things like chat, right? You can have, you go to that website to renew your insurance, and in the right-hand corner, there's a chat with an agent, right? We're really talking with other departments about how you can do that. So one of the things I think you'll see, if they've had environmental services yet, DES yet, was some talk from them about the contact center and about how they're working to mitigate issues of water main breaks, right? So if you find a water main break, is it an emergency or is it not? And so we see a lot of folks call after hours to say on the non-emergency line, well, if we can work with DES to make sure they have capacity as well, it benefits my workload. And so really it is a very integrated effort to be able to tackle some of those things.
Got it. The phone tree component, I mean, 9 different options at the start is not customer service, and that's not what you want, but they're, I could envision a smaller number being effective and actually more efficient. And so I'm interested in kind of your thoughts as to, you're still looking at that? Is that the approach? Or would you want to stay immediately in all cases with a person due to the safety concerns?
We're still looking at it because, for instance, there are some centers, Nevada, I can't remember where, it's a large center within the country that when they reach a certain call load point, that's the only time they apply a phone tree to their non-emergency. So there's nuances in addition to, like you said, hitting a person, then maybe a tree, or if it's a limited number of options, that we're still trying to talk through and figure out a range of things that make sense that we can then hone in on and say, okay, let's talk about this one, let's talk about this one, let's talk about this one, and then sort of work through it with our other departments.
That's helpful. I'll be interested in that over the next year because there's just so much more information in total that folks are getting, and so interested in that. And then unless colleagues have questions on that item.
Different
We have
subject.
other people, so we'll move on. Ms. Garvey?
Yeah, so a few years ago, and I'm sure this just happens kind of over and over again, there was a ready.gov effort in getting information out to people, which is really important. And I believe they did a survey finding out how prepared people were. You know, do you have a supply of food? If you got a radio that works without being plugged in, and that kind of thing. Have we done any kind of survey like that in Arlington? We got plans, because could we get a baseline maybe as we try to kind of change what we're doing?
There was in the community satisfaction survey that went out a bit of information about that. We asked folks to Board Member Gutschall's point about the way they receive information. So we asked them about that. We also asked them about how subjectively how they felt, if they felt prepared for an emergency, and then asked them to answer some questions about whether or not they had food and water on hand, whether or not they had personal savings and some things like that. What we're finding is that by and large, there are segments of the community that are very prepared, and then it's a wide gap. You've got segments of the community that are not. And so one of our tasks is figuring out how to provide some of that skill set and that information in conjunction with our partners. Financial literacy, for example, is an important one. So where we can highlight or and help to enhance the programming of some of our partners, that is the direction that we're taking at this time. Part of it is resource, and part of it is really trying to figure out what makes sense in how we do this.
And I don't know exactly what the answer is. I do know it can be overwhelming. So if you decide you want to be, and I've talked about this before, if you want to be prepared, you can go on a site and suddenly you find yourself, you're supposed to have like 6 gallons of water and be able to walk across something. And it gets to be ridiculous, and pet food and your prescriptions that nobody will let you give. So I think the more we can make it really simple for people, because sometimes I don't think it's a lack of resources, financial resources, it's probably a lack of time and bandwidth. And I think the more we could make that simple, the better. And then another favorite topic of mine, which I know I've talked to you about too, is the way we're all tethered to these devices, and they are wonderful, but in a real emergency at some point these might not work. And then people panic. I mean, people panic today. If you forget your cell phone, you can't find it. So if you're on top of an emergency and you're upset about that, and then you don't have this. So I really loved, and you and I talked about it a little bit, and I'd love to hear your thoughts now on the disaster relief trials that we did, and if there's a way to kind of pump that up a little bit and get more people involved, because it's just a game, and it seems a great way to get people.
So did Samantha make it over? No. So one of the things for folks that don't know, the disaster relief trials, we held it for the first time last year, based upon what we've seen in other communities, particularly Portland, that have high concentrations of folks who use bikes as their primary mode of transportation. And what it did was challenge our residents and even some of our responders to move across points in the county, take supplies, and sort of traverse the county in a simulated emergency using bikes. The second one is coming up. They're in the planning right now, and they are expanding and looking for ways to increase participation. And so, one of the things is we are, you can't use your phone as a map, right? You have to be able to really look at a static map that maybe is in a park or one that's provided to you to figure out how to get around. And we do. We think that's an important skill, and based on the success of the program, I think we're going to be able to continue to include things like that to help teach folks, to help make it more fun and interactive, because, my wife likes to remind me I don't have the most exciting job in the world, so.
All right. I'd throw in a question or two. So regarding the ECC, just curious, the data on the average tenure of Arlington ECC employees, how does that compare with national?
So we are, I would say, right at about the first year turnover with what we see nationally. The 3-year is a little higher. And so one of the things when we talk about exit interviews and we talk with our partners in human resources, what we're finding is we're training really great people for other places, right? We are losing their skills because of a variety of issues. And as I mentioned, we just recently concluded that compensation study. I think that is going to help us because that's one of the main competitors that we see with folks who maybe get to about a 3-year mark. They can get a pretty substantial increase, or we're able to get a substantial increase. I think that is going to bring that down. I think the other thing is this is a very high-stress job in a different way. And just like our partners in public safety and police and fire experience burnout and mental stress and a lot of those issues, we see our dispatchers and call takers increasingly having that issue. And with things like Next Generation 911, where folks are going to be able to text and stream video, these types of mental health issues are going to become more prevalent in our community. So we're talking with our partners in public safety about how we can all team together to use our resources more effectively. Employee assistance has been wonderful for us. And so that the wealth of that program to sort of even provide us what I would call very specialized support, and sort of advice in how we structure training and the tools and competencies we offer our folks, I think is going to help drive those things down.
Believe me, this is not a well thought out opinion because it's literally popped in my head 12 seconds ago. But in the field, are there other approaches to dealing with the mental strain and the emotional strain, like sabbaticals and other sort of employment arrangements?
So one of the things that, so Dave Mulholland, who's our ECC administrator, had a career as a law enforcement officer on the federal side. And one of the things that he has brought with him is the ability to sort of allow folks and create space where they can sort of take that break, even if it's during the middle of the day. And he has also worked to create a team within the ECC of peers who are able to really have the conversation that maybe management or a county person can't. And we've actually had a few things where I think we've been very successful in helping some of our employees to mitigate some problems that may be at home or maybe at the workplace. And I think for us, continuing to invest in that is going to be a huge marker of success.
Ms. Garvey?
Just one. In the past, one of the issues that we were told about the ECC was that people never heard what happened to the calls. And I keep thinking there's got to be a way to fix that. And I talked about my own experience and how much it meant to me and stuff. And somebody said that meant so much. I mean, I think there are a lot of us who have dealt with 911 and really would like to say thank you or let people know what happened. Isn't there a way to make this work?
Yeah, so we're working on that. Actually, I was in the 911 center a few months ago, and one of the call takers and one of our great staff received a call for a mom whose son, she was on the GW Parkway, was choking. And the son's name was the same as this Telecommunicators child's name. And so it was an especially poignant moment. She was extremely professional, highly capable, did a wonderful job. She didn't tell me until afterwards. And it really struck me. What you're saying is she, really doesn't have a connection to know that everything ended up okay. So we've got a few mechanisms that are in place now. One is there's a working group between our folks as well as the police department, and they meet regularly to sort of go over those things, debrief on some of these incidents. And then we've got wonderful support from the fire department. We actually have staff members. There's a communications battalion chief, Chief Fitch, if he was here, who is assigned and provides technical assistance, because the thing about fire dispatch is, and they'll tell you this, there's very specific things, very specific resources that go to calls for very specific reasons. So we have his assistance in that, and he is able to provide additional connection back to the firefighters, the paramedics, and those staff, and they're wonderful about it. I've seen an increase even over the past 8 or so months of folks visiting the 911 center to talk to their dispatcher, and we really can't thank them enough for that.
That's great.
All right, I think we'll get you out on this, unless you have another one.
I have another question before we leave. Or
Okay, all right,
all right.
So we won't get you out on this, but we're trying to get him out quickly because he's got, other things happening.
No, that's okay.
But in terms of the faith-based outreach that you brought up earlier. So is this a voluntary opt-in where faith-based communities, you promote and they voluntarily opt in, or do we do more aggressive outreach, particularly in light of what happened in New Zealand?
Right. So I think I'll give you a few things. We're constantly looking for ways that we can enhance our program in partnership with faith-based. Samantha Brand, once again, in our office, leads our volunteer efforts and is forming a plan called Community Organizations Active in Disasters. And what that is designed to do is really bring a holistic approach, right? We've got great programs offered by our police department, great programs offered by our fire and EMS, and then great programs offered out of our office as well. We want to make sure we're combining those. So following that effort, I don't want to steal too much of Chief Farr's thunder, but very aggressive. They, and the chiefs all talked about this, they reached out to faith-based entities and had a personal connection to make sure, look, what do you need? So as members of a team, we're sort of doing that and supporting each other, because we all know that none of us has the individual resources to tackle the need. So we're trying to figure out how together we can do that. So those officers reached out and had wonderful feedback and provided some valuable service, but also were able to say, if just because I'm a police officer doesn't mean I can't get you fire resources or I can't get you emergency management resources and tools. And so help us to figure that out. So we're very pleased with how that's going, and the response from the community has been overwhelming. For us, it's about figuring out how we can meet the demand. I mean, we've done, close to probably about 1,000 people on Intel Help Arrives, and it is, you all participated. It's resource intensive for us. So we're figuring out how to be more efficient and effective at it, and we're sort of bouncing some ideas around summit days and technical assistance and things like that.
Okay. Ms. Garvey.
This last thing is, you referred to the Emergency Preparedness Council in COG, which I had been on for a long time. And that, I think, provided a really important forum for bringing together people from all different areas. I think emergency management, more than any, what we're sort of fighting is the tendency to silo. And it really doesn't work very well, which folks are realizing. And just for the three gentlemen right here at the table, we're on pause now. And because I think it was kind of messy, sloppy, whatever the issue was, it was inconvenient, something wasn't working well. And I get that a little bit, which is the nature of the beast, all the different kind of people you get together. I don't know that and now it's on a pause, so maybe it will come back together. But you mentioned the UASI grants. I don't believe now there is any place, maybe there is any forum where electeds like us that have some influence with the Congress and what happens are actually at the table. And I think this decision to do the pause is going to come back and bite us. Happy, folks that I talk with, particularly Mr. Snyder in Falls Church, we realized there were some issues with how it was put together, but to completely do a pause and stop it, I think is a huge mistake. And so I just, we're ready to help out as much as we can. And I don't know where it's headed, but it does concern me.
It's a valid point, Ms. Garvey, and the pause was only meant to be temporary. I know they're looking for a solution to getting both electeds and the practitioners in the room more frequently, and at the same time make the meetings perhaps more productive than they seem to have gone over the last couple of years. It's a good forum. It wasn't being, the view was it wasn't perhaps being maximized for the importance of your time and the time of others.
And that probably is part of the case. I also think it was sort of inconvenient. Sometimes it was difficult getting people with all those different kind of views in the room. And as you try to figure out a better way to do the forum, it'd be really good to include those of us on this side who are interested, because we're totally in the dark right now.
I'll just say on that, Ms. Garvey, from a COG governance standpoint, as I understand it, it was an issue of not having that meet the full desired and stated needs of what the council could be doing, and COG having fairly limited resources and not wanting to continue doing something that isn't working. No. So I don't think the desire is to eliminate it, but to rethink how it works so that it doesn't burn through resources and then not serve everyone's needs.
Totally agree. And maybe it's not me. You don't have to reach out to me, but some other elected officials who are interested, it would be good to bring them to the table while you figure it out. Thank you.
All right. I think with that, we are ready to finish with Mr. Miller and the Department of Public Safety, Communications, and Emergency Management. See, it's in my brain now.
Good luck with everything.
Thank you all who attended, including representatives of EPAC. And I realized that on our materials promoting this work session, that item was not actually promoted. That was a fairly late schedule shift, so there are probably people who've been tuning in and who are certainly in attendance to hear this presentation from the manager on compensation. Turn it over to you, Mr. Schwartz.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to introduce the Panjandrum of Personnel, Marcy Foster. Now, you're going to have to.
Look that one up.
At the end of the work sessions, I promise to provide you some sort of glossary or.
That would be helpful. That would be helpful.
Okay.
We could do that at our wrap-up work session.
Yeah,
you can go through all of the adjectives that you've used.
Can we think of some adjectives for the manager?
Oh, I've thought of a few. We'll share those in closed session.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Foster.
I have some of my staff who, some of them are still in the back row, but I have some of them who've moved up in the front row who've helped put the presentation together. So Kristen Young handles payroll and benefits. Tamara Galliani does recruitment and class and compensation. And next to Tamara is Jason Drake, who handles training and OD and employee relations. So to get started, our total compensation goals, pay, benefits, and retirement options that attract, reward, and motivate current and future employees in the labor market that is at full employment. We want to maintain competitiveness, affordability, and sustainability. So you may remember that we changed our comp philosophy a little bit at this time last year. So if we need to refresh anybody's mind on that comp philosophy, we wanted to position the county to have pay range maximums within 5% of the average maximums of our comparison base, pay range minimums for public safety that led among those competitors, provide annual increases that make us competitive, and consider organizations that share our recruitment base and they can be factored in as appropriate in order to maintain that competitiveness. Our employee demographics, there have not been huge shifts over time. The permanent workforce is about the same as it was in 2011. Gender and race has been pretty consistent over the last 5 years. Our gender mix is pretty much 50-50, male-female. And our race is approximately 50% white, 30% African American, and 20% Hispanic. The millennial population, as you would expect, is growing slightly. But employees are also staying with us longer, so you can see we are also employing more employees over the age of 70 as well. Okay. We did look at our exit interviews. We have outsourced our exit interviews to the corporate executive board, so based on the data that they shared with us, we have about 21% of our employees completing those exit interviews, which is actually a very high number of people to complete an exit interview. Compensation has crept up. I think it's moved up slightly in the ranking of what drove them to leave, but 40% of those leaving say they got a pay increase of 15% or more. 52% of our employees talk to their supervisor before making the decision to leave, and I actually consider that to be a good thing, so there's some discussions going on. And benefits are not in the top 10 at all, so people are feeling pretty good about our benefits, and they're leaving for other reasons. The top one being career opportunity, the second one being developmental opportunities. Where are they going? You can see local government is first on the list. Government unspecified, so we can't tell you if it's federal government or local government or state government, is number 2. Retail is number 3. Federal government specified is number 4. 73% said they were actively looking for other jobs. 27% said they received an unsolicited offer. In the local government arena, Fairfax came in number 1. WMATA, Prince William Falls Church, state government, and DC government. None of those are high numbers. Fairfax happened to be 3 employees, but those are the ones that they shared with us. Private enterprise, we're losing employees to engineering firms, insurance companies, a myriad of private organizations, and then we are also losing them to education as well as healthcare. Okay, you heard the comp maintenance plan mentioned before. We periodically do this, so we have a 5-year comp maintenance plan underway at the moment. Last year we wrapped up public safety. This year we've gone to public safety support personnel and we're about ready to embark on trades and planners. Last year we spent about $2.9 million on public safety. Going forward for the next 4 years, the average would be about $1.4 million. As we are going through the comp maintenance, we are updating job descriptions, we're ensuring our ranges are competitive, we're making sure we have future opportunity for employees, and we are looking at Fair Labor Standard Act as well. Okay, the process. There's an employee communication meeting that kicks off the whole process. So as we begin a job study, all employees are invited to a meeting. We also record that because we do have plenty of shift workers or employees who can't attend the meeting for a variety of reasons, so they can access it 24/7. Those position descriptions are updated, as I mentioned, and that's done through interviewing employees and supervisors and observing the employee in the job setting as well. We evaluate the market competitiveness based on our comp philosophy, and then we do ask employees if there are other entities they want us to bring in, and those have provided as well. And when we do our analysis, in the end, we decide if that class is behind, we will adjust that salary range, and we'll adjust the employees impacted by that as well. So I think Aaron just mentioned his employees got a 5% increase based on that job study. So the FY20 proposed budget for general employees will include a 3.25% increase up to the maximum of the grade and a 2% change to the ranges. We want our ranges to stay competitive with the market. We do not shift our ranges as often as other jurisdictions do. So sometimes we're playing catch up. This is a good time to move our ranges. And we are showing the range increases historically for the other jurisdictions. So you can see on average, we have not moved our ranges nearly as much as the other jurisdictions. We do look at the employment cost index. I know that was a question last year. The employment cost index would suggest that we need to increase our wages by 2.4%. In this region, that would not keep us competitive, so we've gone above and beyond that employment cost index. Other indicators that we look at are the local or the national human resource consulting firms like Aon, Towers Watson, Charm, Mercer. Mercer would lead that pack, suggesting that in this region we need a 3.4% increase. And CNN even last week said that the salary base went up for the month of February 3.4%. So there's a range of entities that we look at. Fairfax does consider the employment cost index in their COLA. That's the only local jurisdiction that uses that as their indicator. So this year, employees at max estimated by the end of fiscal year 2019 would be about 700, including public safety personnel. After we move our ranges on July 1, that number at max would be 200 in public safety and about 600 in general. So even as we move that range, we are still going to have employees hit that max because we tend to give the 3.25% increase. These employees will only be getting 2. They'll end up at max again. The living wage, the $15 an hour that we provide, no permanent employees earn less than $15 an hour here. Anybody who earns less than $15 an hour would be somebody classified as a student assistant or a rec assistant. So kind of our summer camps, park staff, so there's about 60 of those who earn less than $15 an hour. And as you know, it's a very tight labor market, so we try to keep our wages in sync with what's going on in the region. This will kind of just hold us steady for now. For public safety, we are suggesting that there should be a 5.5% merit increase up to the max of the grade range. This is an increase from the 3.5 that they have historically had. We're going to continue on the Kelly Day implementation, so offer another 9 employees to the fire department to help reduce their work week, move them closer to getting some additional time away from work, which, will, as you know, will reduce burnout and could potentially lower overtime costs. The jurisdictions with lower hours in this region are Loudoun, DC, Prince George's, Anne Arundel, Prince William, who also plans on moving theirs up, and Montgomery County. So it would make sense that we would want to consider lowering our hours as well. Looking at public safety entry on the next slide. Currently, leading at entry for the fire department would be Fairfax. I know our comp philosophy says we want to lead at entry, but we also said we would take a couple years approach to get us there. Fairfax gave a very generous increase last year, so even though we made some ground, we lost it quickly when Fairfax came back and put their pay on top. For police in the region, MWA, and we did consider MWA in looking at pay for the police department. And for sheriff, we actually lead in the region, but by ever so slightly, and these are right now, so anybody going into the fiscal year 2020 could quickly leap over us. Our suggested entry for 2020 for fire, as you can see, would be 55,723, which one could say would get them caught up because they're nearly 10% behind. But again, this does not factor in what's going on by any other jurisdiction because we do not know those numbers for a fact. Fairfax's sheriff gave a 3% mid-year adjustment last year. We have factored that into the sheriff's numbers. Okay, beyond pay, other data points that we look at, classes lagging at max for general employees. Year over year, you can see that number is creeping up because we're not moving our ranges as quickly as others are. Employees hired over midpoint, we tend to try to focus on midpoint when we're bringing general employees on. Public safety brings them in at entry. You can see those numbers are pretty consistent, so we're continuing to bring our employees in 75% of the time over the midpoint. Turnover. The last column is year to date, so it looks like turnover is way down, but even if we estimate going forward at the same rate, turnover would be down for fiscal year 19. So I think Aaron mentioned that he sees some successes there, so I think everybody would say the same thing. Turnover is going down slightly. That's a good thing. And employees at max, so the 700 or 800 employees that I said are at max, it would be 11% of the general population and 20% of the public safety population. And we did project that out. Generals would hit 19% by the end of the year and public safety would hit 21%. So you can see slightly up over last year, number of employees at max. Okay, pay adjustments in the region that we know about. Ours are in the first line. Fairfax, their increases for general employees will vary between 1.25 and 3%. Public safety has a 5% step increase in Fairfax. There is a 1% COLA to everyone in Fairfax, so those numbers will obviously be a little bit higher when you factor in the COLA. And they have set aside some funding for specific job classes that they think may be behind. Alexandria is also on a step plan. Their steps are between 2.3 and 5%. 5% is usually the entry-level steps. 2.3 is at the higher level. They have moved the range for their executives between 5 and 12%. So they feel like their executives are way off market because they're putting some huge adjustments in there. And their average increase that they were sharing with us is 2.8%. Prince William has a 3% increase across the board, general and public safety, and they have set aside some money for bonuses. The bonuses are performance-based bonuses. And Loudoun, who is not in our comparison base, but we happen to have the information, has a 3% increase across the board. They did a comp study last year. They're planning on putting some significant money into pay to catch up because they feel they're lagging in probably most pay classes. Okay, we had a benefits study group working on many of the benefit packages. The healthcare and leave groups, those are two separate groups, reported out this year, and their recommendations you'll hear about shortly. The retirement work group is underway, and they hope to report out in the fall. The work group's composed of 5 to 7 employees from various departments and various levels, and included public safety and general employees. They looked at the Aon results and a lot of the other benchmarking and survey information we have for the benefit industry. And the recommendations you'll hear about shortly. The retirement piece that will be coming out, you'll hear a lot of the other jurisdictions over the last several years have been making some minor changes around the edges. They have all that information to consider as they make their recommendations in the fall. New benefits going forward. This year, we're going to add a high option dental plan. Employees have asked for a number of years to have a high option dental plan. Our current max is $1,500. It wouldn't take you long to have an issue or two in the dental world to hit that $1,500 max, so we're going to move it up to $2,500. Employees will pay the brunt of that increase on that higher premium, so it'll be a 50-50 cost sharing, where right now we have 80-20 or 75-25, depending on the level of coverage you take. It will also cover orthodontia for adults with separate maximums for the orthodontia. We're going to add an employee-paid long-term disability. I think there's a few gentlemen over in the front rows here that are proponents of a disability program. So it's hard to get disability insurance when you work in some of the job categories that we have here. So for public safety, it's very expensive to buy on your own. This would allow anybody, any employee, to buy a group disability plan, pay for it out of pocket, and it would wrap around the county plan. The county plan only pays for 1 year unless you're injured on the job. So this is an additional opportunity for employees to get a level of coverage beyond that 1 year should they not be injured on the job. It would replace 60% of their salary. Retirement. We will be adding an ability for those with military service to purchase additional years in the retirement system. I think we heard from Public Safety last year how this would be a recruiting tool that they would definitely be supportive of. We would allow employees to purchase up to 4 years of service in our system for active duty military service, and employees will pay the full cost of that benefit as well. For healthcare, we're going to add co-insurance to the prescription drug program for our co-insurance plans. Those are 2 Cigna plans. Co-insurance where employees pay a percentage of the cost of the drug rather than a flat dollar amount. Helps employees become more active in shopping around the best costs for healthcare, because healthcare is normally a very expensive benefit to provide. We would put some caps on them because there are some drugs that have some astronomical dollar figures associated with them, so we won't let the employees pay the full percentage of some of those drugs. Some of those drugs are drugs for MS, drugs for Parkinson's, so there's a category of drugs that we will change the maximum that they will pay. In fiscal year 20, we're going to add a consumer-driven health plan. 21. We're going to add a consumer-driven health plan. It starts in July of 2020. We'll have lower premiums, but we'll have a higher deductible and may have some higher out-of-pocket costs, but it's normally placed next to a health spending account where employees and the employer contribute dollars to an account that will help the employee pay down that high deductible cost. Again, it's consumerism for a health plan, lets employees get involved in healthcare decisions and perhaps shop it around, get lower premiums, and if they do not use their health spending account in any 1 year, it rolls forward to the next year, and it can even roll into retirement, so it helps with retiree medical as well. We are one of the last jurisdictions to adopt a consumer-driven health plan. Prince William is the only other one in this region that does not. Fairfax and Loudoun have had them for years. Alexandria has one as well. As I said, healthcare is normally an expensive benefit to provide, but in this region anyways, everybody has had a very good year. We are not going to increase our premiums, nor is Alexandria. Fairfax will have a 5% premium increase, and Prince William will have 1.6. Normally, you're seeing numbers here between 5 and 10%. It could be the introduction of a co-insurance on the health plan and employees making wiser decisions. It could be an on-site clinic. It could be just the nature of healthcare because we are self-insured and maybe employees didn't have as many claims as they normally have. It could be all kinds of factors, but this is good news. The dental plan will have a 3% increase?
The current plan won't have an increase.
The dental plan will not have an increase, and the Kaiser came back with their increase at 1.9. Kaiser is insured. We do pass that cost increase on to Kaiser members. But that's good news on all fronts. We're putting family-friendly benefits in here. We are very proud of our family-friendly benefits. We have paid parental leave. We are showing some of the usage, and you can see by the yellow bars that our usage has gone up slightly in the last few years, and you can also see by the blue bars that paid parental leave is used more by males than by females. We put this benefit in years ago, and I see the surrounding jurisdictions kind of catching up to us. In fiscal year 2017, we moved from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. Alexandria now offers 6 weeks. This year, Fairfax is considering going from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And so we kind of want to keep our eye on this. We also added adoption assistance last year. We didn't expect a huge influx of adoptions, but we did have one member take advantage of that adoption assistance, one member so far. And we added the previous year a dependent care flexible spending account reimbursement at $500. So our dependent care reimbursement caused our enrollment in the flexible spending account to go up by about 70 personnel. So I think some staff joined in just to get that dependent care reimbursement. That doesn't mean others are not using it. We, along with Loudoun, are the only ones who offer a benefit like this. So we keep our eyes on the family-friendly benefit package. The manager asked us to put a few things in on the workforce housing initiative. CPHD conducted a survey, as I think many of you know, to all county and public school personnel. We had about 1,900 responses to that survey, 870 from the government and about 1,050 from the school side. The results of the survey, the slide says 56% of the respondents had no children under the age of 18. 44% are currently living in Arlington. 41% of them were between the ages of 35 and 48. 30% said they are spending more than $141,000. Oh no, they reported their income as more than $141,000. And 16% of them reported their income as below $61,000. I know the police department is spending a little bit of time looking at what they can do for getting housing for some of their cadets or their recruits, and they've got some great stories that are related to accessible dwelling units, but they're making some headway on getting some options for their staff. The same survey, key takeaways, 55% said they spend more than 30% of their income on their housing costs, and 41% of those who responded, the renters, said they would like to purchase a home in Arlington but don't feel they have the means to afford to stay in Arlington. We do provide Live Where You Work grants. CPHD has a MyPAP program. The Live Where You Work grants are shown on this slide. They tend to be fully taken. It does take the full 12 months for them to be fully taken. Years ago, we had them oversubscribed. The county has always met the need if we had more requests than we have funded, but in the last several years, we have just spent the funding that we have. Currently, a homeowner's grant is $6,400 for purchase of your primary residence. A rental grant is $800. So it doesn't necessarily change somebody's mind to move into Arlington, but those who have made Arlington a choice, that helps them with some of their initial expenses of living in Arlington. Going forward, we got to keep our eye on pay. You see pay as part of the exit survey. You see pay in the region probably looking more like a 3.4% increase overall. So we have to keep our eye on pay. We're going to complete the comp maintenance plan. We have a few more years to complete that. Next year, after we finish planners, we'll be looking at the medical series, so human services will come up. We have moved technology up because technology is also a tough field for us to compete in. We'll keep looking at our pay policies and make sure we have what we need to move employees who are here. We want to retain our employees, so make sure that they can move internally as well. And look for ways to simplify our pay scales because they're very complicated and hard to administer, actually. Benefits, we want to keep communicating the changes we have made. We have to get ahead of communicating the consumer-driven health plan because employees have to get comfortable using it. Loudoun's had it for 10 plus years, and I think they're just starting to move the needle because it does take a huge communication campaign. And we're going to look at the work group recommendations for the retiree work group and see if there's anything we need to do with our retirement system. And diversity inclusion, we're looking at putting out our applications to departments without names, taking anything that can bias the discussion off the application. Once we screen them, we hand them over to departments. We have several departments that said, sure, I'll give that a try. We're going to continue our unconscious bias training. And as you all know, there's a barrier analysis that the Human Rights Office in conjunction with HR will be rolling out in probably 60 days. Anything you'd like to add? Okay. That completes the comp and benefit presentation. Any questions?
Oh, I'm sure there will be, indeed. Seeing no lights on, I'll start with it. So what's our process for ensuring that we have gender pay equity throughout our compensation structure?
Well, we've done a couple of years, most recently, I think in December of 2019, but a few years prior, we've done some of that global looking. So globally, we are fine. Then we have to ratchet down and dig down deep. When employees come on board, we do not suggest, currently we do not suggest the hiring manager ask for a pay stub. In the past, we have said, let's get a pay stub. That's a starting point to figure out what pay should be. That could disadvantage certain groups, so we are currently saying, let's not ask for that pay stub. It's not mandated, but we are not asking that. And we're training managers how to have those discussions because we really need to pay people for skills, experiences, potentially degrees or certifications that they hold and make gender not a determining factor. But we work with managers so they're comfortable making that initial offer.
So just to be clear, so is that forbidden, or are we socializing that it's not necessary to ask?
It's not forbidden. We're sort of in a transition phase because I think some hiring managers are more comfortable at having that negotiation. I mean, the pay stub is plus 10% is easy, right? So we're working with the departments right now to be more comfortable with that. It's not forbidden, though.
Yeah, I would encourage us to strongly, think about practice. I mean,
I think that's an easy place to get to through the training, which we've just started rolling out in the fall. So as soon as we get everybody comfortable, that would be an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I hope so. And with the rest, I mean, I know this is a complicated issue, and the world gets more competent at dealing with this. But are we considering at some point securing the services of a consultant to look at our overall compensation system to see whether or not we have any pay equity issues that are there? Just my desire is not that we ever get in the position of having someone issue a complaint, but that we proactively look to see that we can be as.
Some of the data we would need to provide that consultant we don't track right now. So we would have to have years of experience in certain fields, degrees, that information we wouldn't even have to share. So I think that consultant would, again, do some of the global looks that we do and certainly make some suggestions, but I don't think we would get full value out of that. But so we are looking at that and we are drilling down, and we got to get employees comfortable coming to speak up as well, because if they're there on some of the, even we've dug down a little bit, we haven't seen anything, but that doesn't mean there isn't one out there somewhere. So employees have to get comfortable coming forward or having those discussions with managers to bring their issue forward. Through the job studies, it could likely come up as well. So when we're looking at what we need to do to make us competitive, we're going to look at people who are actually there. And if we see something out of whack at that time, we can make an adjustment as well.
And that's the headline, that through our own looks, we haven't seen anything, and that's a good news story.
That's a good headline.
Right. Just want to make sure that that's there. All right, Ms. Garvey.
While we're sort of talking about certain kinds of barriers, and I don't know, are we taking a look at, I don't know if we call it a scrub or whatever, how when we have requirements for jobs, are they really requirements for the jobs? So in other groups that I'm part of, what we're finding, looking at things, is that sometimes a 4-year degree is required just kind of to like apply, but actually if you look at the job, it's not really needed. Maybe a 2-year degree does, maybe a certification. So have we taken a look at that? Because that can be a barrier to people that, you know, you certainly could bring on board.
Sure. And Tamara may want to weigh in because she's over staffing and recruitment. We work with the managers every time we post a job to make sure we have the right requirements. Often we move things from required to desired. In this tough labor market, we probably are more generous in moving things out of the required because we do have to be able to get people on board, but Tamara can.
Yeah, we certainly try. We're very conscious of that when recruiting, and we have that conversation when jobs are posted, but also as part of the job family study, we're really scrubbing those position descriptions and looking at what is the actual job and the job duties, and then what would be required to meet that.
That's great, because I think we kind of had this mindset, everybody has to have a 4-year college degree, and it's not needed nearly as much as we used to think, I think. So, thank you.
Mr. Gutschall.
My question is frankly going to be quite lofty, but I really want to think about where we're headed, big picture, because I think it's I imagine, so this is only my second time around this budget, but I imagine the conversation over the years has been evolving towards this realization that the marketplace is evolving quite rapidly. The idea that someone goes and works for some, you know, whatever organization that is, and established and has a 20 or 30-year career with one entity is still desirable for a lot of reasons, but is, I think, probably, I'm sure there's data that show less and less the norm. And the whole way that our employment system is set up, where even the fact, and I know we can't change this, but the fact that healthcare is tied to your employer goes back, harkens to a different era. There's also, though, interestingly enough, there was an era and there was a time and a place when large employers, in particular in company towns, provided workforce housing, directly or indirectly, and did things to incentivize, either, again, by building themselves or contracting to build, or incentivizing buying land and making that available for developers, did things to encourage the development of housing and other things, and build communities around their factories or otherwise. And while that is, I think, a notion of a bygone era, I'm interested whether or not there is conversation in professional circles and in thinking, forward thinking about, is there a space for the county to be thinking about more creatively, other than getting beyond just live where you work and just cash stipends, but looking at, as part of our housing plan and our housing programs, whether or not we couldn't be doing something, for example, of partnering with a nonprofit developer to identify a property and develop units that would be specifically available to county employees, things along that nature. And just in general, looking at our whole compensation philosophy, not just around direct cash compensation, but other ways, childcare, other kinds of things that add to quality of life that would make us more attractive and meet multiple goals.
All right. Ms. Garvey.
All right. While you're going all lofty, I thought I'd just sort of stay there. So one of my favorite, I think it's the mission statement of Marriott Corporation. I couldn't call it up here real quickly, but is that we will treat our employees in such a way that they will render world-class service to our customers. And that gets at what you're talking about. I mean, it can be so much more than pay. I love that mission statement. It also makes it clear that the only way that we're going to well serve our people is through the people who actually do the work, and it sort of puts the attention where it needs to be. And I also, you know, maybe it seems nitpicky, but our goals bother me because it doesn't say anything about the quality of the employees. So we've got pay, benefits, and retirement options. The way we'll have this is it's a goal that attract, retain, reward, and motivate current and future employees in a labor market that is at full employment. I think we want to attract and motivate something like top quality current and future employees, or something about the quality. So, because I think we have really good quality folks, but I'd like to actually kind of do that as a clear shout out. So we don't want just anybody working for us. We want the best people working for us. So anyway, that's, you know, not maybe a big deal for not a budget thing, but I just think as a kind of a statement that that's important. And then while I've got the mic, can I go for one more?
Please go ahead.
Okay. And that gets me down to the more sort of practical. Why is it, I think it's slide 13, when you have the comparatives that we have, and it talks about the region. Why is everybody in the region in Virginia? Why do we not? There must be a reason. Why, I mean, because I think of our region as District of Columbia and Montgomery County, and I think actually when it comes for competing for employees, those may be more of our competitors than Loudoun County, which is farther away. So could you discuss that a little bit?
Sure. And really quickly, I want to draw your attention to the total comp philosophy, where it says we recognize our employees are our foundation of our success. We want to attract, develop, recruit, motivate, retain a high caliber, diverse workforce. So we took a little shortcut here in the presentation, but your adopted philosophy has a little bit more to it.
Thank you.
Okay, I think your question is why are we just comparing in the region of Virginia? Is it, can I simplify it as that?
Yes.
There's several reasons. We do look at where we draw from, where we recruit from, and where our employees live. The majority of those are in Virginia. Doesn't mean they're not in DC or Maryland. Maryland does collective bargaining that changes the landscape slightly, doesn't make it impossible, but they sign contracts that are good for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so you might have some really, really flat numbers and then a big peak, so we would have to adjust a little bit for that. DC does not share information as well as the other jurisdictions do, so we can get hot and cold on getting information from DC. So some of it is as easy as it is to get information, and do they look exactly like the workforce that we have here. So Montgomery County would probably have the same types of jobs that we have, but they have collective bargaining agreements. That makes us have to look at things a little bit differently. Having worked in a collective bargaining arena before, sometimes you give up things to get things, so it just changes the landscape a little. But when we look at where our employees live and where our recruits are coming from, they're primarily in Virginia. I think Loudoun will be a huge player shortly, so we don't want to rule them out. That's why we did put them on that slide. They're just growing their base of employees. That's why they know their compensation is behind. But all these job studies allow people to bring in other entities, and I have a list of other entities that are included. I didn't rattle them off, but especially when it's the water authority, we bring in Fairfax Water, we bring in DC Water, so we're pulling that information. It's just not part of the comp philosophy.
Okay, and I just think as we move forward and become more and more of a region, that what's happening just across the river in Montgomery County may affect us more and more, particularly for tech jobs. And I think I get that the comparisons are hard, but I assume when somebody's looking for a job, they figure it out. It just seems moving forward, we want to make sure that we, keep that in mind. And I clearly that you do on some particular areas, but I guess I'm just sort of uncomfortable when we have a slide and it says the region and it's only Virginia. I guess that's just what I'm saying. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll associate myself with Ms. Garvey's remarks generally. I understand the approach that you're taking, but as the exit interviews show, with WMATA and DC being among the places that compete for our talent, clearly, even if it's not a part of the methodology for every job at every class, if we're ignorant to those dynamics, then we're likely going to, miss out on either attracting or retaining some talent. Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you for the thorough presentation. I actually would share, with respect to DC and Maryland, I'd also love to see that comparison. I realize it's not There may be a majority, but I would like to see that if it's possible next year. And then just in talking about diversity, I wondered if I had heard right. Did you mention separately if we track our Asian American working population, employee population?
So we have the full data set. We did skinny it down for here.
Okay.
And I don't have, I can venture a guess, I don't want to do that, but we can easily get you that information.
That'd be great.
It's part of the affirmative action plan, so it is out there.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, colleagues? All right, so I think with that, thank you very much, Ms. Foster.
Thank you.
Mr. Schwartz, is there anything else you'd like to detail for us about compensation?
Not at the moment. I'm prepared also to have a longer conversation if you're interested on public safety as part of when the fire and police chief are here.
That's when I was expecting we would have that conversation. And usually for the compensation presentation, we receive lots of information and it invites further questions that we have through written questions. So this is very much in keeping with our understanding your approach so that we can then chew over it and figure out how we're going to apply it to various other conversations we have later. So with that, we are adjourned.
Oh, the commissions, we missed commissions?
Oh, did I? You know what? I did. I'm so sorry. We're not adjourned. Forget that. You didn't hear that.
Right. So sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. So today we have from our Civil Service Commission, I believe we have, who's here today? George?
George just ran out.
You did?
Can we run,
Okay.
Can we grab him?
And then,
Let's see if he's out there.
and then from our Human Rights Commission, Mr. Roland Watkins, our chair. So please come up to the front. We happily await your comments on this portion of the presentation.
Sorry.
Thank you, Kendra. No, it happens. All right, several members of the Human Rights Commission here, so, yeah, that's right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Dorsey and members of the Arlington County Board. Thank you for allowing me as Chairman of the Arlington County Human Rights Commission to comment on the County Manager's proposed fiscal 2020 budget this morning. I also would like to take this opportunity to introduce two other members of the commission that we have. With me this morning, we have Carol Lieber, and we also have Walter Sargent. These are two active members of the commission, and I think this shows the commitment that we have pretty much to not only the commission, but to the work that the county board does. And thank you for inviting and allowing them to be here this morning with me. The Human Rights Commission has been very busy. We had a very busy year in 2018, and we presently have a very ambitious agenda for this year. We are continuing our outreach activities at locations throughout the county. On April 13th, the Human Rights Commission will have its third annual Tiffany Jocelyn Human Rights Forum. The topic is Aging the Arlington Way, what we all should know. It will be held at the Arlington Mill Community and Senior Citizen, and refreshments for the event will be provided by Freddy's Beach Bar and Grill. It begins at 3:00 p.m., and all of the members of the county board are invited. One of the panelists is a member of the Arlington Commission on Aging. So this will be what we hope will be one of several endeavors with other commissions this year. Later this year, we'll have a forum in which we partner with EEOC. And we have another event in which we recognize individuals, organizations, and businesses that demonstrate outstanding achievement in the area of human rights and diversity in Arlington County. And that is known as the James B. Hunter Awards, to which we are working on right now. We have again embarked upon the task of improving Arlington County's score in the Human Rights Campaign Municipality Equality Index, the so-called MEI, annual survey. The score last year was 92 out of 100. We are determined to improve on this and better our score, addressing this year the areas where we need to improve. We did not get, unfortunately, the highest score in the state last year, but we will this year. We have 2 commissioners who have volunteered to co-chair that task force this year. Now, the EEO Standing Committee has had a very ambitious agenda for this year. The committee had its first meeting on Tuesday, this past Tuesday. While we thank the county board for funding for the barrier analysis, we're still anxiously awaiting for the approval and completion of the requests for proposal, the so-called RFP, so that the procurement process can be completed. And it's good to hear an update on that this morning. We're also awaiting the final affirmative action plan for fiscal year 2019. It is the hope of Kylie Tibbetts, the chairman of the EEO Standing Committee, and who unfortunately could not be here this morning, that we can assist in accomplishing this goal of having a plan in place prior to the start of the fiscal year. So we might not be able to provide that type of assistance for FY 2019, but we stand ready to provide that assistance for FY 2020. We have a lot to accomplish, and it is crucial that we have the staff and support to do our outreach to the citizens of this county, in addition to the other mission work that the commissioners have provided to citizens of this county and the county board pursuant to the statute. At the last meeting of the commission on March 14th, the members expressed their dissatisfaction with the proposal to eliminate the only administrative support position in the Office of Human Rights in the EEO. We have seen that office lose positions over the years and feel that this position is needed and should be spared. We, the members of the commission, deal directly with this position and have relied on the person and the position and the person occupying the position to help the members of the commission as we embark upon all of the things that I have mentioned above. The individual in this position is one of only 2 people in that office who is bilingual and provides translation to us as we reach out to the Hispanic community. We need the support to fulfill our mission under the statute. We ask the county board to keep that position. I thank the county manager for inviting me to the briefing that he had for the various commission chairs, and accept the fact that decisions are not easy pretty much for him to make. However, the Human Rights Commission requests that the county board not allow the Office of Human Rights and the EEO to lose such an important position. And I probably have taken longer than the 3 minutes allowed. So I'll end right now and just, again, thank you on behalf of the members of the Arlington County Human Rights Commission. I thank the county board for allowing us to come before you this morning.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the 3 of you for coming. So, Mr. Watkins, when it comes to the position, I think I get the sense that it's been integral in doing a lot of the work on the staff end that the commission needs in order to be able to function. Has there been a proposal or a discussion about what might be a way to actually fulfill those duties, even if the position were not around with you and the commission?
I don't think we have had that discussion yet because technically that person is still there. We've had when I had the briefing, the county manager did mention that they are looking at certain options. So I think there's going to be some discussion on it.
Mr. Schwartz, this is part of your base budget, right?
That is correct.
Right. So, you know, a little bit for us to chew on, but I think, you know, maybe what's important is to maybe start a conversation about how, you know, your needs can be accomplished within whatever structure is proposed there. I would find it a little unusual for the board to Actually, I'm not going to say anything because we haven't discussed it. It would just be my opinion, so I'll just leave it at that.
I did want to add one thing because I appreciate Roland raising those points. As far as the bilingual support, that's absolutely crucial to what this office does, and there still will be one staff person with those skills, and to the extent that we need to use the other county staff that have the language proficiency, we will do it. We cannot flag in the level of support we provide on that. And as far as I'm committed to making sure that there's a way for employees to take advantage of the Human Rights Office in a way that remains confidential, and so that we're looking at alternative ways to provide access to that office that won't rely on that staff person. And part of this is also a prelude to, I think, what you're going to see on this floor more broadly in about a year from now, where we're trying to consolidate entry points. And we're not necessarily going to do that for human rights, but my office has administrative resources that go beyond this one position, and I'm committed to making sure that they get whatever administrative support they need, because I think that it hasn't been as efficiently done as it could be. But that's not to take away from any of the points that you raised, but you wanted to make sure I provided that commitment.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Watkins. And then Mr. Bailey, thank you for not getting too far away from us. Welcome.
Well, first off, again, my name is George Bailey. I'm the new chair of the Civil Service Commission, and was happy to be here today for the conversation. Obviously, through the course of our regular meetings, we get updates from staff around compensation and benefits as one part of the role of our commission. So I was happy to be here today and listen to the presentation from Marcy, but also get a context of the questions and the things that are top of mind to you. I particularly, my job outside in the real world is all in the area of compensation and benefits and employee engagement. So I have a particular interest and appreciation for the things that you need to balance and the county has to balance in terms of cost and sustainability and engaging employees in a very, very competitive environment. So the issues that all of you were talking about are ones I'm pretty familiar with, and it's finding that right balance. So appreciate the discussion. I don't know if you have any particular questions for me, but I
want to make sure I add something, George, because I deeply regret the fact that the county had a snow day when I was supposed to come and meet with you all and make the presentation. I miss that annual gathering.
Yes. We're sorry to not have you, but.
I see you haven't been too aggressive in trying to make it up, so, all right. Any questions for George?
No, thank you.
No, we appreciate it. And I would just say, you know, we frequently don't hear from the Civil Service Commission except for annually through a report. But to the extent that you ever have any advice to share in terms of what you would like to see the board looking at, or just emerging trends in the space, given the expertise that you and I know the various members of the commission have, do not be shy about communicating with us.
Thank you.
Terrific. All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.